Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's Saturday, week 11. Time for the injury report. We're going to go through every single team, tell you who's in and who's out, and then also rank running backs and wide receivers. I haven't given you my flex rankings yet. We'll also tack that on after the injury report. So a lot to get to, no time to waste. Let's begin with those teams on bye. The Colts and Saints are inactive this week. You just can't start them. They give you a bagel. The Jets and Patriots have also already played, so they're not included in this video. In Arizona, first team to mention, has quite a lot of injuries on the slate here. Marvin Harrison Jr. has appendicitis. He had appendix surgery, out for this game. I don't know when he'll be back. He might be back next week, but it could linger longer than that. It is unfortunate that Marvin Harrison will miss this game. So Michael Wilson gets an upgrade, and then Greg Dortch will be the wide receiver 2 because Zay Jones is on IR. He exited last week and is out for possibly the season. And Michael Wilson, I think, is the guy you should trust in Arizona at receiver. But Trey McBride is really just going to be a stud. I think Trey McBride is like clearly the tight end 1 in fantasy this week, a locked-in player in your lineup. But otherwise, their quarterback, Kyler Murray, has been on IR for a week now. Brissett is much better, honestly. And then Trey Benson is still on IR, not practicing yet. Bam Knight, also questionable, limited all week in practice, but it looks like it's Emari DeMercado's job. He's the guy I'd rather have. On defense, cornerback Will Johnson, the rookie, is out for the second straight week, but after missing last week, Max Melton, the other cornerback, is active, so at least they have one of their top corners. That is helpful, but 3 of their linebackers are out. Their edge rusher, Darius Robinson, is questionable. Their defensive tackle, Walter Nolan, also questionable. And then on offense, the O-line is going to be missing right tackle Jonah Williams, and then right guard Will Hernandez is questionable yet again. So a lot of injuries on Arizona. Their depth chart is a bit low. I kind of want to flip my pick and take the Niners this week, but I'm going to stick with my original call on Monday. For the Niners, Brock Purdy is going to play. He's active, and we'll see how healthy he is coming off the toe injury. But he is also getting Ricky Pearsall back. So that's a big change to the offense. I think Pearsall is the guy you want. He plays really well against the Cardinals in his 2 games earlier in his career against them. In division, Pearsall plays really well. But Brandon Ayuk, not ready to return yet. He did not practice yet. He's still on IR, basically. And I don't expect him back until after the bye week. But on defense, cornerback Diamador Lenore is questionable. Otherwise, all the other defensive injuries that we've known about are still the case. Let's move on to the Falcons-Panthers game, where in Atlanta, Drake London is questionable. On Wednesday, he did not practice, but it was with an illness. And then on Thursday and Friday, he returned. He was limited with a back injury. So I'm hopeful that the back is not a problem. There has been a game where he was a last-minute inactive, so that'd be a surprise that hopefully doesn't happen, but I guess isn't impossible to happen again. I expect him to play, but just make sure you want to know for a fact that London is going to play. So that is the key. If he is inactive, I don't really trust Darnell Mooney. I don't trust any receiver in this offense with Penix. But in their offensive line, left guard Matthew Bergeron is questionable. So is right guard Chris Lindstrom. And I think they'll play, but it's not a guarantee. Linebacker Leonard Floyd is out on defense. And then their defensive end, Zach Harrison's questionable. So is cornerback Mike Hughes, also questionable. They also have some other linebacker injuries. Their depth at linebacker is kind of thin right now. But for Carolina, their offense is fully healthy. They're all good to go. But on defense, linebacker Trayvon Wallace is out. For the Ravens-Browns game in Cleveland, weather's a big factor in that matchup. I've mentioned it in previous videos, but the wind's going to be well over 20 miles per hour. Will definitely impact the game plan. I don't expect a lot of passing in this game. Last time it happened in Cleveland, very few pass catchers had any value. So I'm a bit worried about Lamar Jackson in that department, but his rushing stats probably factor in. They're also without running back Justice Hill in Baltimore. He's out for this game, so Keaton Mitchell, I think, will get extra volume, especially with the good game script. I think Derrick Henry is getting a lot of touches. I think Keaton Mitchell might get a dozen. I think maybe Keaton Mitchell has value this week. But wide receiver Rashad Bateman is out, so Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews get a few more targets, but not enough to move the needle, in my opinion. I think they still don't throw the ball that often. And then on defense, cornerback Marlon Humphrey is out. But for Cleveland, the Browns offense is fully healthy, nothing to mention. But then on defense, Malik Collins, the defensive tackle, is questionable. I think I only trust Quinshon Judkins, though, in this matchup. I think they run the ball like crazy. In that Bills Buccaneers game in Buffalo, the weather's also pretty gross. The wind is also over 20 miles per hour, and I could see a lot of rush attempts as well. And then on offense for the Bills, tight end Dalton Kincaid is not going to play. He might miss some time. They upgraded Gabe Davis from the practice squad, so they don't really trust their receiving core too much. And maybe he contributes. But mainly, I'm upgrading Dawson Knox, who is live to score a touchdown this week. And then I also find Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman a bit safer despite the downgrade with the weather. But in terms of volume, they will get more targets without Kincaid. On defense, cornerback Teron Johnson and Cam Lewis, both corners are questionable. And then the Bills also have 10 total defensive players either out or on IR. There's a lot of injuries on defense in Buffalo. But for the Bucs in Tampa, Bucky Irving remains out. He returned to practice. He was limited all week. However, he's not ruled ready to go. He is going to miss again. Rachaad White is the running back you want. The matchup's good for Rachaad. I like him quite a bit with the weather. Chris Godwin also not ready to return. He did practice this week. He was limited, but not going to play. Not ready for game time. Jalen McMillan, there is a minor update on him. He's still on IR, but his return window looks to be in December. They're expecting him back in the month of December. They might just wait as long as possible, though. It's possible. He never has any value. And same with Mike Evans. I don't expect him back until the real playoffs for the Bucs, so probably doesn't have value down the stretch in fantasy. But on the offensive line, left guard Ben Breedson is out, and right guard Luke Haggard is questionable. On defense, the only player to mention is Hassan Reddick, the linebacker, is out. For the Bears-Vikings game, this is a game with no weather to worry about. This game is indoors. And for the Minnesota Vikings, their offense is fully healthy. Earlier in the week, J.J. McCarthy and Aaron Jones were limited in practice, but they are good to go. They're off the injury report. And at least for Aaron Jones, he does torch the Chicago Bears. McCarthy gets a good matchup. I think the Vikings offense will compete against Chicago. But on defense, linebacker Jonathan Grenard is questionable. And then for Chicago, their entire offense is healthy. They're all good to go. A lot of them miss practice on Wednesday, but then by Friday, they're full and they are at least active for this game. So that should be a fun one. But on defense, linebacker TJ Edwards is out, and strong safety Jaquan Brisker is questionable. In the Pittsburgh Bengals game, weather's a minor factor. There is some wind, but it's not anywhere near as strong as the Cleveland or Buffalo wind. Those games I'd worry a bit more compared to this one. For the Steelers, their offense is healthy except for left guard Isaac Seumalo. He is questionable for the second week in a row. On defense, though, they're missing 3 key pieces. 2 of them are linebackers. Cole Holcomb and Alex Highsmith are both out. And then in the secondary, cornerback Darius Slay is also out. So they struggled to cover Jamar Chase and T. Higgins last time. I would expect the same, especially without Darius Slay. For the Bengals offense, Joe Flacco is active. He will play. And then Joe Burrow returned to practice but is still on IR. They are targeting a Thanksgiving return. They face off against the Ravens on Thursday night in Week 13. So expect Flacco this week and next. But in Week 13, I think Burrow will be back. So that's positive news. The Bengals are still alive in that division. This game means a lot. But backup running back Samaje Perine is out. They might look to Taj Brooks to fill in for Chase Brown. But on defense, Trey Hendrickson, the defensive end, is out. And that would be nice to have him. Everyone else on the Bengals defense fucking sucks. But in Vegas, no weather concerns here. It's in a dome, so that's positive. For the Raiders, they're fully healthy on offense. Nothing to worry about in fantasy. The only injury they have is their right guard, Jackson Powers-Johnson. The defense is fine, but their right guard, JPJ, is on IR. For the Cowboys, their offense is fully healthy with the exception of Miles Sanders, who's been on IR for over a month now. But there is some positive news. Linebacker Demarion Overshone is active. He's making his season debut off the bye. So perhaps their defense will look better in the second half of the year. They've been terrible, and Overshone is definitely one of their playmakers. So that's an interesting factor to monitor. It could be a tougher matchup rest of the season. But in that Broncos-Chiefs game, the weather is nice, nothing to worry about. For the Kansas City Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco is out for the second week in a row. He did not practice at all this week, so not sure when he comes back. It's not in this game. So Kareem Hunt going to have to step up. Rashard Smith, not sure I trust him at all. But at least on the offensive line, they do get left tackle Josh Simmons back on offense. He's active. He missed some time with a personal situation, and at least off the bye, he's back on the field. But otherwise, their defense is fully healthy. There are very few injuries in Kansas City to mention. For the Broncos, that's not the case. J.K. Dobbins is out. So both starting running backs inactive this week, and Dobbins might go on IR. They're at least contemplating that. They have not decided to do it yet. So he might be back this year dealing with a foot injury. He got a second opinion and it's not looking good. So maybe they'll save him for the playoffs, but at the moment, RJ Harvey gets a big upgrade, and at least for 2 or 3 weeks, I don't expect Dobbins to be back on the field. So start RJ Harvey this week, a big upgrade even in a bad matchup. However, on defense, linebackers Alex Singleton and Jonah Ellis are out for the Broncos, and so is their star cornerback Pat Surtain. Rashee Rice doesn't get a massive downgrade, but the Broncos defense is still one of the best in the league. In the Eagles-Lions game, Philadelphia has no weather concerns. It'll be 57 degrees with very little wind at night in Philly, and their offense is fully healthy except for backup wide receiver Johnny Wilson and the fullback. Their defense is good. Philly's very healthy at this point in time. But for the Lions, can't say the same. Tight end Sam Laporta is out with a back injury. He did not practice at all this week. And their backup tight end Brock Wright is also questionable. Limited all week. I think he'll play, but he's not 100%. Tight end might be a problem, but that's just a reason to upgrade Jameson Williams. I think JMO will get extra targets in this game. But on the offensive line, both tackles, left tackle Taylor Decker and right tackle Penei Sewell, are both questionable. Taylor Decker's been banged up all season, but Penei Sewell is a new addition, and hopefully they play, but they are game time decisions in this matchup. On defense, cornerback Terrion Arnold and free safety Kirby Joseph are both out, and the secondary has been a problem for them all year. They're also possibly going to miss Amik Robertson. The other cornerback is also questionable in Detroit, but in the Giants-Packers game in New Jersey, the wind is also a strong factor here. Over 20-mile-per-hour winds in East Rutherford. So that could impact the passing game. I think the defense for Green Bay is going to be lights out, especially against Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston will get the start because Jackson Dart is out with a concussion. So that is kind of an upgrade to the pass catchers, but a main upgrade to the Packers defense. A pick six kind of feels like a lock. So they're a must start for sure. And then I don't know if I trust Jameis Winston too much. The picks will definitely be happening. And he's also missing Darius Slayton on offense. The wide receiver's out with a hamstring injury. So I would expect the tight ends to step up. At least Daniel Bellinger's active, but really I'm interested in Theo Johnson and Wan'Dale Robinson. A lot of volume expected to go their way. But on defense, a lot of players are doubtful or missing. Defensive end, Nunez Roches is doubtful. So is strong safety Tyler Nubin. He's doubtful to play. And then linebacker Kayvon Thibodeau has been ruled out. Their linebacker Bobby Okereke is questionable, and so is cornerback Paulson Adebo. He has missed some time in the last few games. But for the Packers, their wide receiver core is at least going to be healthier than last week. Romeo Doubs is active. He was full in practice this week. So he did leave last week's game. It's good to have him back. But Matthew Golden, questionable, limited all week with a shoulder injury, is a game time decision, did not play last week. So not sure about him. I don't trust Golden these days. I'd rather go with Christian Watson. But in the bad weather, I don't see a lot of safety with the Packers pass catchers. Jaden Reed remains on IR. He is still out. However, his timeline for recovery was 6 to 8 weeks, and this marks the 9th week that he has missed. So perhaps they're saving him for the divisional matchups coming up. In the next 3 weeks, they have 3 straight divisional games, and rest of the season, they still have 5 total that they have yet to play, which will decide their fate in this division. Last year they had a terrible record, so I could see him return as soon as next week, but at the moment Jaden Reed has yet to practice with the Packers. So keep an eye out on him. He could have really good value rest of season down the line. With no Tucker Kraft, I like him a lot, but until he plays, you have no idea when that's going to happen. He's irrelevant at least this week. I mentioned Tucker Kraft is on IR, so Luke Musgrave is a bit more appealing. But then on defense, overall, they're pretty healthy except for cornerback Nate Hobbs, who is out. And then defensive end Lucas Van Ness is questionable. But for the Titans-Texans game in Tennessee, the weather isn't bad. Nothing to worry about there. And Calvin Ridley might be coming back. He was limited all week in practice with that hamstring injury. He missed 3 games prior to the bye, and I am expecting him to play. But the matchup's dog shit. The Texans secondary is really good, so I'm not dying to start Calvin Ridley at all. Defensive end Jeffrey Simmons is questionable. He might be returning to the lineup. So is Arden Key. He's also questionable at linebacker. And then at free safety, Xavier Woods is out. And then at cornerback, L'Jarius Sneed is on IR. But for the Texans, CJ Stroud will miss his 2nd straight game with a concussion. He's out for this one. And then Dalton Schultz was out in practice Wednesday and Thursday, but he is active. He was full on Friday. So Schultz will play, but was banged up pretty bad this week. And then on the offensive line, right guard Ed Ingram is questionable. Not sure if he'll be active. On defense, cornerback Jalen Petrie is out. So is kicker Kaimi Fairbairn, and you may need a backup kicker for the 2nd week in a row. In the Chargers-Jaguars game, the weather is perfect, 78 degrees and sunny, so don't downgrade anyone because of the weather in Jacksonville. But at least the Jaguars get Brian Thomas Jr. back. He's questionable with that ankle injury, but was limited all week in practice, and I am expecting him to play. A game time decision, just make sure, but I did rank Brian Thomas Jr. with the expectation he will suit up. But I thought Brenton Strange would come back to the lineup this week. However, on Friday, he suffered a setback and he did not practice. He is staying on IR. So he's still out. He was limited Wednesday, Thursday, but not ready to come back. Hunter Long, the backup tight end, is also out. So no tight end in Jacksonville has value this week. Parker Washington was limited earlier in the week, but is active. He will play. And I'd rather have Washington than Jacoby Myers. But with BTJ back, don't think I trust him. On defense, cornerback Jordan Lewis is out. And so is right tackle Anton Harrison. He is also out for this game. For the Chargers, we know that Omarion Hampton is staying on IR through the bye week, so expect to return in week 13. But Kimani Vidal, still the guy for one last game. Quentin Johnston, questionable with a shin injury, limited Wednesday, Thursday, but then on Friday was full. I'm expecting QJ to suit up. And then otherwise, we know that their offensive line is a mess. There's a ton of injuries there. And then on defense, they're getting a bit healthier overall. Free safety Elijah Molden is questionable. He's missed some time. So that's positive news, but otherwise, the offensive line is still dog shit. 2 games left. Let's stay in LA with the Rams, the other LA team who are hosting Seattle. That game is indoors. Potentially a big shootout, but in division, maybe the defenses step up. At least for the Rams offense, Devontae Adams will play. He did exit last week a bit early with an oblique strain, and it sounds like it's just a pain tolerance situation. It sounds like he's going to be good to go. He's definitely expected to play in a key divisional rivalry game. He wants to, that's for sure. But Tutu Atwell is on IR, and I don't really trust any backup in his place. Defensive end Kobe Turner is the only defensive player who's questionable. Otherwise, the Rams are pretty healthy. For Seattle, Torrey Horton is out for the 2nd week, but Cooper Kupp remains active. And I think in this revenge spot, Cooper Kupp is probably going to score a touchdown. But on the offensive line, center Jalen Sundell is out. And then on defense, free safety Julian Love is still on IR, and defensive tackle Jaron Reed was placed on IR recently. He just underwent surgery, probably out for the year. But then last game to mention is in Madrid. There's a lot of humidity in this matchup, but the Dolphins are pretty used to it. I think it doesn't matter for them. The Commanders, though, might be impacted because of the humidity. The Dolphins are without Tyreek Hill and Darren Waller. They're both still on IR, but it's possible that Waller comes back after their bye in week 12. We might get Waller 2 weeks from now. And then on defense, Bradley Chubb, defensive end, is questionable. Cornerback Rasul Douglas, also questionable. And then on offense, last thing to mention, tight end Julian Hill is active. He missed last week. So I did mention in the rankings, Greg Dulcich is interesting. I still prefer him among the Dolphins tight ends, but maybe he's not as safe if Julian Hill comes back to the lineup. He is listed as their starting tight end on the depth chart. But for the Commanders, we know that quarterback Jaden Daniels is out. He's not going to play, so Mariota's the guy for a while. Terry McLaurin also out. He didn't practice at all this week. And then Treylon Burks has been ruled out. He's filling in for Luke McCaffrey, who's on IR. So I would assume Jalen Lane runs the most routes behind Deebo Samuel. But in general, I'm just upgrading Zach Ertz. And last week he got vultured by Ben Sennett, who is out this week. No concern with Zach Ertz. But on defense, Daron Payne, the defensive tackle, has been suspended, not active, in this game. So those are all of the injuries on offensive defense across the league, every single team. And now let's move on to the flex rankings. I will show you the individual rankings at each position when I'm done with the top 100. But if you want to skip ahead and just get the final version, you can always look at the timestamps. I do label every individual player as well. So check the description down below if you just want to jump ahead. But we got a lot of names to mention. Let's get going. In the top 12, this tier, every player is like a foundational piece on your team. You drafted them super high or they've just earned elite status. They are locks in the lineup. At number 1 overall, I'm going Jahmyr Gibbs this week. Last week was just so insane. And I think this Eagles game is most likely a shootout. I think the pivot to Dan Campbell as the play caller, he's going to be dialing up Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams a little extra, in my opinion. So like that play caller change for him, I think he is the best player this week. But the best receiver, I think, is JSN. And last season against the Rams, there was a game where DK Metcalf wasn't on the field, and he was the wide receiver 1 with that offense. And last season in that game, he had 13 targets, 7 catches, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns, 33.5 fantasy points in half PPR. JSN's going to dominate this week. I love JSN in this matchup. But at 3 and 4, I have running backs 2 and 3. Christian McCaffrey at Arizona fucking torches them. His last 4 games versus Arizona as a member of the Niners, he's averaging 29.5 points per game, an average of 23 touches, 7.3 receptions, 153 yards per game, and he also has 7 touchdowns in those 4 games. McCaffrey owns them. He's obviously a lock in the lineup. Next player to mention is Josh Jacobs, who I think will really crush the Giants. The game script is really ideal. The weather's bad. And then the Giants rank as an elite matchup. It's top 3 against the position, and there's no way I'm benching Josh Jacobs. These next 3 players, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, and Puka Nacua, are like the bedrock of your wide receiver position. They will be lights out. With Lamb, it's prime time off a bye against the Raiders. Sign me up. With Jamar Chase, last time he played against Pittsburgh, he had 16 catches for 161 yards. Flacco will just send it his way all game. And then Puka is a stud. I don't even have to mention why I'm ranking Puka this high. And Devon Achane is going to dominate against Washington. That defense is terrible. I think they've given up at this point. In the last 4 games, it ranks as a top 5 matchup for the running back position. So Achane going to dominate. He's my RB4. And then James Cook right behind him should get a volume that is probably top 4 on the week. The weather in Buffalo definitely going to lead to a good game script for James Cook. He will play very well. And then the Bucs have actually been a top 10 matchup for running backs this year. With Kincaid out, the volume is just so locked in. James Cook will be elite this week. So they're in my top 9 overall. At 10, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown at Philadelphia. Not going to overthink it. I could see Dan Campbell really dial it up for JMO, but still Amon-Ra's the safety blanket. There's no Laporta. You got to trust Amon-Ra. Drake London versus Carolina could be the number 1 player on the week, but given he's a game time call, he is wide receiver 6 in the rankings, and hopefully he plays. I assume he'll be good to go, but that is unfortunate if he misses. I think he'll be fine though. In the same game though, I have Bijan Robinson right behind him at running back 6, and if you've been watching Bijan closely in fantasy, he's been underwhelming, really disappointing last few games without some touchdowns that have been going to Tyler Algier. So I think in this offense, I'd rather go Drake London this week, but the matchup isn't bad for Bijan. He's just moving down the list because he's starting to be a bit more mediocre. Last 3 games, a bit disappointing. But I do have him above the tier break. I also have him above Rico Dowdle in the same game. Rico Dowdle at RB7 is a lock. Last 2 games against the Falcons in his career, one with Carolina, one with the Cowboys. He's averaging just shy of 15 points per game, and the volume is only 14 touches per game. The volume will be elite this week. The Falcons are also the number 1 running back matchup in the last month. They just gave up 50 points to Jonathan Taylor. So Dowdle might drop another 30-pointer this week. Got to start him. And then Ashton Jeanty against the Cowboys defense. This matchup is top 6. Jeanty's played lights out at home. And in primetime, I think their offense looks a little bit better. With some extra rest, Jeanty will play well. The Cowboys defense is a great matchup here. So love Jeanty. I think he could really be elite this week. And then we saw Travion Henderson score another 3 touchdowns on Thursday night. I ranked him at RB9 entering that game. I have him at 15 overall. And he probably finishes closer to top 5. But still, that was my endorsement. I definitely told you to start Travion as a top 10 running back. But right behind Travion, I think Trey McBride literally has the same level upside. He's my tight end 1. I won't mention too much, but with no Marvin Harrison Jr., the volume might be 15 plus targets against the Niners. At 17 overall, wide receiver 7, I have Nico Collins, followed by 2 other receivers, Devontae Smith and Devontae Adams. There is no chance I am benching these top 10 plays at the position. Nico was insanely productive last week with Davis Mills. He plays lights out against Jacksonville, and that was a much better matchup, but the Titans secondary's banged up. I'm obviously trusting Nico Collins. If we pull up his last 4 games versus Tennessee in division, he's averaging 72 yards per game and 12.9 half PPR points. He'll be fine, definitely going over double digits. Devontae Smith, though, has been the main cog in that offense in Philly lately. He's definitely the most safe option they have. And against Detroit, it's a good matchup. He's definitely a top 10 play at receiver. I'd rather have Devontae Smith right now than A.J. Brown. But Devontae Adams, always a lock in the lineup. The oblique injury, a minor red flag, but it sounds like he's going to play through it. I'm not worried. Devontae Adams in the top 10 at the position, top 20 overall. At RB10, I have Rachaad White just above Javonte Williams and Kyren Williams. I love the volume upgrade for Rachaad with bad weather. And then the Bills are also a good matchup. They rank top 5 for the position this year. So Bucky Irving's still out. I think Rachaad White in a much better matchup this week will bounce back. The Lions and Patriots matchup he recently had are one of the worst you could ask for, bottom 5 at the position. This one is top 5. So I upgrade Rachaad. I expect heavy volume this week. And then Javonte, always a lock, definitely a safe bet for a touchdown. Against the Raiders, it's an average matchup, so no concern. And then Kyren Williams gets a tough spot against Seattle, but it's the Rams offense, and this game is probably high scoring. I don't want to fade those elite Rams weapons, Kyren Williams included. So he's a few spots behind Devontae Adams, but still in the top 25 overall. And then Rashee Rice comes in right behind him. And although Pat Surtain isn't going to play, I still think the downgrade, respecting Denver's defense a little bit, is not the worst bet to make. Rashee is still a top 10 receiver, so can't bench him, but I do respect Denver's defense just enough not to put him top 5 at the position. Jaylen Waddle, though, gets a massive upgrade against the Commanders. This matchup is elite right now. The Commanders' defense is allowing 41.7 points per game to wide receivers in the last 4 matchups. They got torched by Torrey Horton and Cody White. Darnold absolutely demolished them. Last week, Jared Goff was the quarterback 1, and I think Tua is going to play lights out. We know that he has a great connection with Waddle, who's been playing really well lately. The floor is really safe. This week, I think a touchdown is guaranteed for Waddle against the Commanders. The humidity will play into the Dolphins' hand, and I trust 100 yards as well. I think Waddle's going to smash. I wanted to rank him higher, but there's a bit safer name value with the guys I had ranked above. But right behind Rashee Rice, that's definitely an endorsement. I have him 1 spot above Brock Bowers versus the Cowboys, who I do expect to bounce back. Had a bad game against Denver, but against the Cowboys, no one can guard him. I'm not worried about Demarion Overshone returning. And George Kittle was lights out last week, caught all 9 of his targets. And then this week he gets Brock Purdy back, who I think does have slightly better chemistry than Mac Jones with Kittle. So Kittle's going to dominate against Arizona. He will go back and forth with McBride. They both have 25 plus point upside. Emeka Egbuka finishes out this tier, though. Given the weather in Buffalo, despite locked in volume, I have to downgrade Egbuka a little bit, but not enough to bench. I'm still going to start him, but he's not inside my top 10. I'm a bit worried that the wind limits the target share distributed by Baker Mayfield, but you'll still probably get like 8 or 9 targets, and one of them probably finds pay dirt. Egbuka will also get targeted down the field. The yardage will be fine. When he does catch it, I think he could average like 18, 20 yards per reception. But definitely going to keep starting him at receiver. I just can't bench him. As someone who has Egbuka, I couldn't do that. So let's move on. The next tier goes from 28 overall to 44. And we're extending from RB 13 to 18. We got 6 running backs in this tier, and then wide receiver 13 through 20. So these are all of the RB2s and wide receiver 2s I feel really safe starting. I also have 3 tight ends in this tier, and everyone I am still endorsing in this next tier, but I would start them more likely in the top 50 overall. You're not going to bench him in a typical 10 or 12 team league. They would still fit in to the lineup. So at 28 and 29, I have Quinshon Judkins and Derrick Henry. I'm expecting a ton of rushing volume for both players in this game. The weather's terrible. The wind is bad. And the volume could literally eclipse 30 touches for both of them. So volume will carry you. The floor is elite with both players. But in terms of matchups, they're not easy. The Ravens have been stepping up on defense lately, especially against the run. And then the Browns on the season are the toughest matchup you can find. So can't upgrade them too much, but based on volume, the floor is just so safe. There is a very high outcome for both guys. The volume will carry you, and I think both give you at least 80 plus yards, and most likely a touchdown. I think they'll both have very safe paths for at least 14 plus points this week. I like both Quinshon and Derrick Henry, but I think Judkins is more talented and more effective at this point in Derrick Henry's career. I'd rather go Judkins than Derrick Henry, but at number 30, there's just one like red flag that kind of lingers with him. Justin Jefferson is just not the same player with JJ McCarthy. I'm still going to start him at wide receiver 13, though. He's not who you thought you were getting when you drafted him. He was the wide receiver 3 off the board. So this is very unfortunate. I'm sad to rank him this low, but still I think you have to start him. If you look at his track record against Chicago, damn, he really plays well, especially at home. He torches the Bears, and in his last 4 games, he is averaging 14.1 points per game, an average of 9.8 targets, 6.8 catches, 77 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So a touchdown will be critical here. However, last time he played against Chicago with McCarthy, that was week 1, and he did have a touchdown in that game. So I don't think I can bench him, but I don't think Jefferson is quarterback proof anymore. That's why even in a bad matchup for Egbuka with weather, I'd rather go Egbuka than Justin Jefferson straight up. But got to start him, can't bench him. I think you just roll with the punches, and hopefully you get the touchdown. But right behind him, I have George Pickens at Las Vegas, definitely locked into your lineup in that Cowboys offense. Is pretty much money in the bank. And the only player getting a downgrade is Jake Ferguson. If someone's going to benefit in the passing game, it would be Pickens, who would get those targets if Ferguson is locked up. So he's a must start, top 15 receiver. So is T. Higgins this week. Higgins has played lights out against Pittsburgh. Last time he played against them, he almost had a second touchdown, if not for the slide to seal the game. And if we look at his last 4, he is averaging 15.7 points per game against the Steelers. 3 touchdowns in that span, 87 yards per game. And if you look at the last 4 with Flacco, he also has 3 touchdowns. A touchdown, I think, is pretty safe to bet on for Higgins in this matchup, especially with Darius Slay not active. The cornerback is not going to be able to cover T. Higgins for the Steelers. So got to start him. No way I'm benching T. Higgins. Ladd McConkey comes in at number 33 overall, wide receiver 16. And in this same tier, there's no chance I am benching Ladd McConkey. He's the safest play in the Chargers receiving core, and especially with Keenan starting to fade lately, I really trust Ladd to get probably 10 targets. I think that's the safe bet projection for Ladd McConkey. But I actually have him back-to-back with Oronde Gadsden, his teammate, the tight end, who did suffer a quad bruise last week and did exit, but is active for this game. So as long as Gadsden finishes the game, I love this matchup for him. The Jaguars are allowing over 19 points per game to the tight end position on average last 4 games. This is one of the best, if not the best matchups you can find. Only the Bengals have allowed more fantasy points to the position as of late. So I am 100% upgrading Oronde Gadsden. If not for the injury, I might rank him like 10 spots higher, honestly. And I have him back-to-back with Ladd McConkey. I think I'd still rather go with Ladd, but Gadsden has arguably higher upside. And at his respective position, he holds more value because the bar is just so much lower at tight end, especially with like a lot of injuries and buys this week at tight end. So Ladd and Gadsden will play very well. I'm starting both of them. Ladd is a top 16 receiver. At running back 15, I have Saquon Barkley behind the two Chargers. I'm worried about Saquon because of this matchup. The Lions are a bottom 3 matchup for running backs, and in the last month, they rank as the worst matchup you could get. And Saquon is very touchdown dependent this year. I could see him held out of the end zone. So that's where I mentioned a slight risk factor in this tier, but at RB15, I don't think I'm actually going to bench Saquon, but I could see the Lions really step up on defense and really limit him. He has limited upside this year. He's not the same player as 2024. So good luck. I'd still rather go Saquon though than Jameson Williams in the same game. However, this game is probably a shootout. I think both of them will find the end zone. So I think they both are good plays. JMO I think has higher upside than Saquon, but not the same floor. JMO can still give you a terrible bust game. He has had a bagel in like recent history. So I think he'll be fine, especially with no Laporta. The volume I think is locked in, but the variance with him is a bit risky. I'd still think Saquon is a safer play. But in the same game, back to back, I think they're both players you want in the lineup. Stephon Diggs did go over 100 yards. I ranked him at number 18 going into Thursday night, so that looks like a good call. No touchdown, but an extremely high floor from Stephon Diggs. These next 3 players are running backs who I think I'm starting no matter what. We got a great upgrade this week for Jaylen Warren against the Bengals. That matchup is the best for the position. So got to start him. Last time he played against Cincinnati, it was week 7. He had 20 touches, 4 of them were catches, and a total 158 yards, but he did not score a touchdown. Just shy of 18 points, though. Not going to complain if that happens again. And what's interesting about Warren, in his last 4 games versus Cincinnati, he does not have a touchdown to speak of. So this is the most elite matchup you can find. The floor is a guarantee, but if the trends repeat, Warren is not going to score a touchdown this week, and that would limit the upside significantly. So that's my only concern with Warren. The only reason I'm not ranking him above Saquon Barkley, but I expect close to 100 plus yards from scrimmage. The Bengals cannot stop anyone. So start Jaylen Warren. I'm also going to start Travis Etienne versus the Chargers. The volume is locked up for Etienne right now. The workload is very guaranteed, but the touchdowns are not. He's not that effective on the goal line, and he also gets vultured by Bishal Tutin quite often. So Etienne also a bit concerning for a touchdown, but the production will keep the floor very high. And then DeAndre Swift, the RB1 for Chicago, has been very productive this season. He's active, good to go. He will play. I would start him against the Vikings, even in a neutral, slightly below average matchup. I got to start DeAndre Swift at RB18. He is in my lineup, number 40 overall in the flex rankings. Then I would go with 2 tight ends, Travis Kelce, Dallas Goedert. I think Kelce is actually safer than Goddard this week. Sometimes the target share in Philadelphia is a bit random. So I like Kelce. He's played very well against Denver. It's also been a good matchup for him. So I swapped them in the rankings, and I consider Kelce number 41 overall in the flex. And then I would rather go Goddard than A.J. Brown. I just don't know what's going to happen with A.J. Brown. The vibes are off. He's telling you to trade him away in fantasy, and he could just not step up. The weird vibes, I just got to acknowledge that and rank him low. In the top 20, though, I'm still starting A.J. Brown. The matchup against Detroit is good. On paper, that game is likely a shootout, so let's keep him in the lineup. But genuinely, I'd rather have Devontae Smith straight up, and then I'd also rather have Dallas Goedert in this game. Number 44, last player in this tier, is also a bit of a player up in the air, not the best vibes with Brian Thomas Jr. Because of his injury status, it's not a guarantee he's even going to play, but I think he'll suit up. I think he'll be active. I'm expecting him to play. He was limited all week in practice, and for that reason, I think he's top 20. You drafted him high. He has had some good games. It's just a matter of will he finish the game. If he does, it's not a good matchup. The Chargers are actually bottom 3 against the position, but I trust his talent and I trust the volume. Let's stick with Brian Thomas Jr. in our lineup at wide receiver 20. I'll still start him. But next up at the position, I have Ricky Pearsall at wide receiver 21. Player 45 overall, and honestly, I kind of want to rank him much higher because he plays really well against Arizona, and although he has missed some time lately, he will be active in this game. Last two games versus the Arizona Cardinals, two of the few games in Pierce Hall's career, he plays lights out against the Cardinals, an average of 15.3 points per game, an average of 9.5 targets per game, 7 catches, 93 yards per game, and a touchdown. He was great against them earlier this season. I think it was back in week 3 when they faced off. So I feel really confident with him coming back to the lineup. I think he's fully healthy. He was full in practice, good to go. And I think his chemistry with Brock Purdy is really good. They had a lot of practice time back in the summer together, and I'm sure as they've been getting healthier lately, they've also been practicing together with the second team. So I like Ricky Pearsall a lot. He really steps up in this Cardinals matchup, and I've noticed some trends with Shanahan, especially in division. He usually showcases one receiver, and oftentimes against Arizona, that guy is Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk is out, but if you're telling me Jauan Jennings is the prototypical replacement for Ayuk in this offense, I don't believe you. I think it's Ricky Pearsall. I think he will dominate. In terms of volume, I think he'll have at least 9 targets in this game. I want to start him. I don't think he'll have any limitations. I believe in Ricky Pearsall. I'm starting him in one of my leagues. I think rest of season, if he's fully healthy, he could be a league winner. I think he'll be the top receiver in San Francisco. Him and George Kittle are the guys you want. Obviously, you also want CMC. But next in the rankings would be 4 straight running backs. And similar to Ricky Pearsall, I think the upside is truly elite for RJ Harvey this week. The volume will be there, no J.K. Dobbins, but the matchup against the Chiefs is not good. The Chiefs are definitely a tough spot. They've been getting much more difficult in the last 4 games. They're down to only allowing 13.4 points per game. They would rank as one of the toughest matchups you can find at the position. So I'm worried about that. I would have ranked him possibly top 10 if this was against like Tennessee or another top 5 matchup. But against the Chiefs, I got to pump the brakes a little bit. But I'm still starting RJ Harvey. I trust that the Broncos RB1 in Sean Payton's offense is going to be valuable. There is for sure a lot of volume incoming for RJ Harvey. So that should carry. I would trust a touchdown as well. But against the Chiefs, perhaps it doesn't happen. And then behind RJ Harvey, I do have Chase Brown at Pittsburgh. He played really well last time against Pittsburgh, had over 100 yards, if I'm not mistaken. And then if you look at his last 2 games against them in his career, on limited volume, he's averaging 14.3 points per game. Will he score a touchdown this week? I don't know. The yards have been there, though, in this Bengals offense. Chase Brown has been stepping up with Flacco. So I still kind of envision a bit of a shootout in this game. Last time it was 32-31, and it's possible it happens again. I could see the Bengals offense play very well. So Chase Brown, I think, will be fine at RB20. I would still start him, but I think you're starting to get close to the flex territory, more of a low-end RB2, but one of the safer bets I think you can make. Woody Marks, I would start with some confidence this week. I guess technically we're in the flex territory, but still in my top 50 overall. I think he's a very, very high-end play. He was in week 4, first time around against Tennessee. He had 21 touches, 4 catches, 119 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That was his breakout game. He had just shy of 26 points. So it looks like a big Woody Marks game. I would assume they lean into him again, given how well he played the first time. And with no CJ Stroud, I think this matchup really looks good for the running back position. It ranks top 5 on the year against the position. So love the touchdown odds for Woody Marks. They've given up over 15 running back touchdowns this year. The Titans are so vulnerable. I trust Woody Marks. But because of his general volume concerns, I don't think I can put him above RJ Harvey or Chase Brown. A lot of upside, but still a limited floor. If he burns you, it wouldn't totally shock me. But I think he has very high upside, worth starting this week. Behind him, I have Kimani Vidal, who is a volume monster, definitely a safe bet to make. Very high floor, but in this offense, I'm a bit worried the matchup will burn you. The Jags really limit running backs very well. They are really bad at stopping tight ends and receivers, though, and I'm expecting Justin Herbert to be throwing it like crazy. So the game script is the only problem. The matchup is not good for Kimani Vidal, and I could see them just throw it a little extra. But given it's the Chargers offense, I still expect them to lean on the run, and a touchdown is probably a safe bet to make for Kimani. I think he'll cover you for at least like 10 plus points. Kimani, I think, is still relatively safe in your lineup. Top 50 overall. Just above 3 Chicago Bears. They have Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and Colston Loveland back to back to back. The decoy usage for Rome and DJ Moore has been very annoying last 2 games. They've alternated bagels. So there's a lot of risk here. If Ben Johnson wants to do that again, then maybe it'll flip to Rome being the guy you shouldn't trust. But against the Vikings, it's been a top 5 matchup last 4 games. They're allowing well over 30 points total to the position every week. So I like this upgrade significantly for these Bears receivers and pass catchers. And my preference is Rome over DJ, despite some headaches last couple games. But I still think they're better than Colston Loveland. I would still expect the receivers to have more value. But you could tell me that Loveland really dominates and is by far a better player this week. I love his upside. Loveland is a very, very appealing option. Rest of season, I think he could be a league winner. I drafted him like crazy in the summer, and now that he's emerging, the upside is quite evident. So I like this matchup for all 3 of them. I'll have Loveland behind Moore and Odunze, but I think all 3 are pretty much equally valuable this week. I think they're all worth starting, at worst, as a flex play. But next, I have 2 New York Giants, Wan'Dale Robinson and Theo Johnson, back-to-back at 53 and 54 overall at flex. Wan'Dale is my wide receiver 24, so I'm telling you to start him. I'm also telling you to start Theo as a top 10 tight end, and it's the Jameis Winston effect. The upside is elite down the field, especially with no Darius Slayton. The target share is even more narrow, so they will be trailing. I expect at least 1 interception and most likely a pick 6 by Jameis Winston. That always improves the game script for pass catchers. They will be trailing. They will have to throw at some point, but the weather is bad. There's a lot of wind. That could be a problem, but I still think Jameis is not going to give a shit. There will be some opportunity down the field for both guys. So high upside, but a bit low floor. I think they're both worth starting though, as solid top 60 flex plays. But next up, we got the risk reward ratio of Quentin Johnston at Jacksonville. And last week he had 10 targets. That makes 16 in his last 2 games. And since the bagel, he's been much better, much more valuable than Keenan Allen. 2 good games back to back out of QJ. Meanwhile, Keenan is stuck at like 5 targets last 3 games, and 6 of his last 7 games have been really bad. Quentin Johnston is a little bit safer right now than Keenan Allen. So I want to be starting receivers in this game. I like Justin Herbert to be throwing a lot of touchdowns and a lot of yards this week. I think Quentin Johnston is the 3rd target behind Ladd and Gadsden. I think QJ is a top 30 receiving option this week at number 25 at the position. I would start him. I know he's questionable right now, but he was full in practice on Friday. He will play. I expect Quentin Johnston to be active. So high upside, I'd rather go Kimani Vidal, but still Quentin Johnston in the same tier. Only 6 spots behind Kimani Vidal. At number 56 overall, we have Khalil Shakir versus Tampa Bay. Had good volume last week. I think a very safe investment with him. Given there's no Dalton Kincaid, that volume is locked up. But in the bad wind and weather in Buffalo, I'm a bit worried. The Bucs aren't the best matchup possible, and I expect heavy ground game usage. So Khalil Shakir could be a victim of the weather, and for that reason, I think he is less safe of a play than Quentin Johnston. Lower ceiling, that's for sure. I also think DK Metcalf is a little bit underwhelming at wide receiver 27. There's just something missing in this Steelers offense, and although the Bengals defense sucks, they get torched by tight end. Last time, DK Metcalf only had 50 yards against the Bengals, even though Rodgers threw for 4 touchdowns. They all went to tight end. So could happen again. I think he's more of a floor play. He could have some upside, but the touchdowns have been fading with Metcalf as of late. I think he'll be fine, but not elite against the Bengals. Debo is also a bit mediocre these days. I think his injuries are the main reason why. But with no Terry, the volume is there, but every defense knows that Debo's getting the ball, so he gets bracketed, double-teamed a lot. He is limited in terms of upside for those reasons. But at wide receiver 28, I think I would start him. He is one of my preferred flex options, and a top 30 receiver is someone I would start. But running backs 23 and 24, Kareem Hunt and Aaron Jones come in right behind him in the top 60 overall. And I like Kareem Hunt for the touchdown upside, but I think at this stage of his career, he is nothing more than a short yardage back. The efficiency is going to be very low, and if he does not get those goal line touches to convert, I think he'll get screwed. So a lot of risk with Kareem Hunt, but with no Pacheco, he is the guy. And I would expect at least like 14 carries to happen again. That's what he got against Buffalo last time. He was the starter. So good luck. You need the touchdown. I could envision it not working out, though. The Broncos, I think, will play very well on defense, and the offensive line is healthy this time, but still might not help him enough. And then Aaron Jones, if it wasn't for his age, I'd be ranking much higher because he owns Chicago. Let's look at Aaron Jones' last 3 games versus Chicago as a member of Minnesota. Let's not count him as a Packer in this sample size. In those 3 games, an average of 19 touches, 2.7 catches, 101 yards per game, and 3 touchdowns, an average of 17.5 half PPR points. So even though he's diminished this season with McCarthy, the offense not the same, he did also score like a 30-yard receiving touchdown last time he played against Chicago in week 1. This game is at home, no weather to worry about. And if you're going to get 17 points again, it wouldn't entirely shock me, but odds are that doesn't happen. In the last month, the Bears' run defense has actually been really good. They've been holding opposing running backs to less than 15 points per game on average. The volume is still split with Jordan Mason, so I don't think Aaron Jones is an elite option. I think the upside is not going to lead to that 17-point average. However, the floor I think is interesting, and then the matchup could turn into a shootout. I could see very little defense from Chicago overall. So at player 60 overall, you could do much worse. At RB24, I consider him a good flex option. I think he'll continue to play well against the Bears, but need a touchdown. It might not hit. Without it, I think he'll get screwed. But similar to Kareem Hunt, I think it's a solid bet to make as the RB1 in his respective offense. I prefer Aaron Jones much more than Jordan Mason. But next up in the tier here at 61 overall, I have Jake Ferguson, my tight end number 9, and I would start him, but kind of reluctantly. I'm downgrading him significantly because of the matchup against Las Vegas. It's a bad one, so good luck. I think he'll be fine, but he could burn you. The rest of the way, I would be only flexing these players. These next like 20 or so names are like the real toss-ups on that start-sit fence in your lineup. At 62, I have Courtland Sutton, my wide receiver 29, and although he's been bad lately, he plays really well against the Chiefs, especially under Sean Payton. Last 4 games for Courtland Sutton, he has a touchdown in each of them, and I would assume that continues. I think Courtland Sutton will find the end zone in this game, but rough matchup against Trent McDuffie. He's been playing poorly. Without a touchdown, similar to Aaron Jones and Kareem Hunt, I think you could get totally fucked, but he should be fine. I think a touchdown will happen yet again. Jordan Addison at wide receiver 30 has upside. He had 10 targets last week, but only 3 receptions. But then Jalen Naylor also had like over 100 yards. So there is upside in Minnesota. It's just not going to where we expect it to. And Addison is risky for sure, but still tempting enough to rank in the top 30 at the position. There's no weather at all. But in another dome game, I have Ted McMillan at the Falcons. His last game against Atlanta was not impressive at all. That was his first game against them in his career. That was week 3. He had 6.3 points, 8 targets, 3 catches for 48 yards and no touchdown. And passing touchdowns are just so slim in Carolina to bet on in the first place. I'm not expecting much upside for Tet McMillan. This is a heavy Rico Dowdle game, if you ask me. I don't think Tet is that appealing. Just a low-end flex play at the best. But next on the list is Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals versus the Niners. The matchup is really good. San Francisco does rank as a top 6 matchup in the last 4 games, but really the only upside here is the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. is out, so Michael Wilson will run the most routes at the receiver position. If you look at the last 4 games with Brissett, he's been actually okay, not good. An average of 6.2 points is nothing special, but he does not have a touchdown. If that's his floor this week with extra volume, then I would assume it bumps up to like 8 points, 8 or 9, I think is the minimum you'll get from Michael Wilson. Because in those 4 games, he has 20 total targets, 14 total catches, 179 yards, and that's not terrible. That's usable. It's about 45 yards on average for about 4 catches per game. So I think that'll go up. I think it'll be closer to like 6 catches for like 75 yards, and that's usable in fantasy. That's not terrible. I consider him a legit streaming option. And when you factor in the matchup, a touchdown's also not a bad bet to make. Brissett is slinging it. I don't think Michael Wilson is a bad plug and play. My favorite option off the wire, the first player I'm ranking that is very low rostered at the moment. So if you're still looking for an interesting flex play, my recommendation would be Michael Wilson. At wide receiver 32, he is interesting. Let's not pretend he's not, with no Marvin Harrison. Next player in the rankings, though, is his teammate Emari Demercado versus San Francisco. And it's shocking that Demercado's the guy, but the Niners matchup's not bad, and I don't trust Bam Knight at all. So Demercado's been getting volume. He's been contributing. You could do much worse than Demercado. I'd rather go Emari Demercado than Dave Montgomery at Philadelphia. The Eagles' defense looked elite last week, and I have some major concerns that now that Dan Campbell's the play caller, we're going to get so much Gibbs. Moving forward, it really vultures Montgomery's value significantly. So he's very touchdown dependent. If you don't get it, you'll get screwed. I'm a bit worried. I'd rather go Demercado. That's saying a lot with Montgomery. But if he does contribute, if this game is a shootout and he does score touchdowns, he has lead upside. He's one of the best flex plays you can find. But right behind him, I have Zach Ertz at the Dolphins in Madrid. And Ertz is going to get a lot of volume with no Terry McLaurin, and I think he will score a touchdown. The Dolphins rank as a top 4 matchup for Zach Ertz. So he's a top 10 tight end, a solid flex play regardless of position, and I like him in the top 70. But right behind him in the same matchup, I have Malik Washington versus the Commanders, and his matchup is also elite. The Commanders are giving up over 40 points per week to receivers last 4 games. So I love Jaylen Waddle this week. I'm also upgrading Malik Washington. And in the subscriber league, I am starting Malik Washington at flex. He's my guy. I like the upside. I think a touchdown is a decent bet to make. This Commanders secondary is dog shit. So I like Malik quite a bit. I think he's a very legit flex play in the top 70. Overall, my wide receiver 33 is a solid start in my view. But right behind him, I have Zay Flowers at Cleveland. The weather, I think, is a major concern, but with no Rashad Bateman, the volume should go up. So he will get targeted, that's for sure. But it's possible he does nothing. It's possible none of them are catchable. It's possible the volume is only like 5 targets because they just don't throw it in the bad wind. So good luck there. I'd rather fade all of the pass catchers in this matchup. No thanks in Cleveland, but you could do worse. I understand. Still starting Zay Flowers. His floor has been solid all year, but Troy Franklin at wide receiver 35 has been outperforming Sutton lately, so tempted to rank him higher, but Sutton plays well against the Chiefs. I'd still rather go Sutton. I have him 6 spots higher at the position and 9 overall in the flex ranking. So still give me Sutton over Franklin, but Franklin is definitely relevant. Number 35 at receiver is still a good flex play. And then call me crazy, I'm going out on a limb here, but I consider this revenge game for Cooper Kupp a narrative I want to buy into. I expect a touchdown for Cooper Kupp. If they leave LA and Kupp does not score, it would feel like a wasted, disappointing opportunity. I think this game means a lot to him. Going against his former team in his former stadium, I think the home crowd will give him a standing ovation if he scores a touchdown. I really think that's going to happen this week. So I am willing to bet on it. He's been up and down. The yardage has actually been okay. If you look at Cooper Kupp, in 3 of his last games, he is averaging 29 yards per catch. He's been a deep threat lately, and I just have a gut call that one of them might be a house call, or at the very least, they just target him when they get in the red zone. So I like Cooper Kupp. I'm willing to bet on the revenge narrative. I think it's legit with this player this week. He's healthy. He's good to go. I think he'll score a touchdown on the Rams. Next in the rankings are 3 running backs. Breece Hall is one of them who already played, and Breece did have 7.5 points on Thursday night. So I ranked him at RB27, not expecting him to go over 10 points without a touchdown. I think the ranking actually looks really good in hindsight. Not terrible. If anything, he should be going lower than this, but based on name value, I was probably ranking him lower than most other people would give him credit for. So I did downgrade Breece Hall, and I also don't really trust Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet very much, but this week I'd rather go Walker. I do not trust a touchdown for either Seahawks running back. The Rams have only allowed running backs to score if they play for San Francisco. Only Brian Robinson last week and Christian McCaffrey back in week 6 did score a touchdown against the Rams run defense. So I'm not expecting any upside here. So for that reason, I'm not bumping up Charbonnet. Usually I recommend Charbonnet above Walker, but this week I think Walker will play better. If you look at their history against the Rams, Walker is averaging 99 yards per game in his last 4. He has no touchdowns against them. However, he does get almost 25 touches per game. So that volume probably goes down. The yards probably go down. And the matchup's just not good in the first place. But Charbonnet plays much worse against them. He's averaging only 64 yards per game in his last 3 against the Rams, less than 8 points per game. Meanwhile, Walker averages 11 plus. So give me Walker over Charbs this week, but back-to-back, it's not that much different. They're in a committee with each other, and they're both going to get similar volume. They'll both probably finish with similar stat lines. So in the top 75 overall, not ideal. RB's 28 and 29. I'm not dying to endorse them, but I suppose you could do much worse than Charbonnet and Walker. But give me K9 over Charbs this week. Then I'm ranking 4 tight ends back to back to back to back to back. I got Cade Otton, Hunter Henry, Dawson Knox, and Evan Ingram. And you're just hoping for a touchdown. But I do believe that the floor is decent with all of them. Hunter Henry did have 6.5 points, and that's kind of my baseline projection for each of them. So they're less interesting at flex, but at tight end, they do factor in a bit more. Just from a floor standpoint, they're not going to totally burn you. And then there is decent odds at a touchdown. With Otton, he's been giving good yards lately, but the matchup's bad, so I would rather go Zach Ertz. And then Hunter Henry didn't score a touchdown, but thought the upside was kind of worth it against the Jets. Dawson Knox, I think, could definitely score a touchdown. Will step up with no Kincaid. And then Evan Ingram is usually a good floor play as well. I think at worst, he'll give you the same stat line as Hunter Henry. But the Chiefs are giving up 12 plus points to the tight end position in the last month. There is upside for Evan Ingram. So need a touchdown? It's possible, but that's been the name of the game for like 20 players now. And you could do much worse than these tight ends. But last player in this tier, player 80 overall, is my wide receiver 37. And it's Trey Tucker versus Dallas. I still don't know if I trust Trey Tucker at all, but the Cowboys matchup's been the best on the season. And one receiver has to be at least considered in your lineup anytime they play Dallas. So for me, that's Trey Tucker in this offense. I think if I was forced to start a Raiders wideout, it would be Trey Tucker. But Tyler Lockett contributes, and I could see Dante Thornton finally pop off down the field. But Trey Tucker is the main guy to look for beyond Bowers and Ashton Genty in Las Vegas. But the next names to mention are all players I would officially be benching. I think outside the top 80, it's just not where I want to go. So let's definitely pump the brakes. But if you're in a jam, these are the guys I would go to in order of preference. I got Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson at wide receivers 38 and 39. I think they're not in a good spot here. The Giants aren't a bad matchup, but the weather's really bad. And I also think the game script is not going to benefit them because I'm expecting at least 1 interception and perhaps 2, if not 2 pick sixes from Jameis Winston. So I could see them just run the ball like crazy. The Giants are a great matchup for the run game. And then if they get up big, I wouldn't expect Jordan Love to be slinging it down the field in the second half if the defense is also scoring outright themselves. So that's the main concern. Dobbs also got hurt last week, so they probably don't force the issue with him. He's active, will play, and I still think he's the most valuable receiver in Green Bay. But Watson, I think, is equally as valuable, not safe at all. And the game script, I think, is the main red flag why I don't have them ranked higher. But in the top 40 at the position, you could do worse. They're okay, I guess, but I think the upside is capped, and I'm not excited to bet on this windy game when they will probably win heavily with their defense. So no thanks if I can avoid it, but I'd rather go with them than Keenan Allen. Keenan is not playing very well. In 6 of his last 7 games, he's been averaging only 6.2 points. There's only 1 game in his last 7 with an outlier that has a good stat line. And that game was a 14 target, heavy, garbage time matchup. Basically 3 quarters were all catch-up mode. The volume has been irrepeatable since then. Last 3 games, Keenan is maxing out at 5 targets. And at the moment, Quentin Johnston is playing better. So Keenan, I think, is going to be saved for those important matchups in division that decide their playoff fate. I also think they really want him healthy for the playoffs themselves. And at his age, I think in this matchup across the country, they will favor Quentin Johnston a bit more. So they'll look to Gadsden, they'll look to Ladd and QJ ahead of him. And I don't think they're going to force it. If they don't have to, Keenan, I think, will also repeat that 5-target average last 3 weeks. So not ideal, just capped upside, not enough volume to trust. But Jauan Jennings plays like dog shit against the Cardinals. He is averaging less than 3 points per game in his last 4 versus Arizona. 3.7 on 4.5 targets, less than 3 catches, 23 yards, and no touchdowns. Meanwhile, Ricky Pearsall is averaging 15 points per game in his last 2 against Arizona. So I mentioned it with Pearsall. Shanahan often games planned to showcase like one specific receiver in these division games, and especially against Arizona, it has not been Jauan Jennings. So I'm fully endorsing Pearsall. I am telling you to bench Jauan Jennings if you can. At least fade him at wide receiver 41. I am not projecting more than 10 points for Jauan Jennings. So good luck with the touchdown, but I think with Pearsall coming back, it's not going to hit. And then these next 2 players are the 2 Titans running backs, Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard. I have them back to back. And if you look at Pollard's career stats against Houston, especially playing with the Titans, he actually plays pretty decently, an average of 11 points per game. And the volume is really the only thing carrying Pollard up to this point. So I consider Tyjae to have more upside off the bye, given he's fully healthy now. I expect his volume to be increasing. And if I was stashing one player rest of season, give me Tyjae Spears. I think he has the upside you're looking for. But the Texans are not a good matchup. I don't think they're safe starts at all. And if I could, I'd rather just bench both of them. I don't think either will go over 10 points. But if you're putting a gun to my head, I'm starting one of them, give me Tyjae Spears over Tony Pollard. Next 2 players are receivers, and one of them is also a Texan. I have Calvin Ridley versus Houston, who I think will play, but limited in practice, coming off a hamstring injury against Derek Stingley of Houston. No thank you. Very low upside, and even the floor I think is low. But last time we saw him fully healthy, he did drop 100+ yards on just 5 catches. He did have a breakout before getting hurt a few weeks ago in Tennessee. I still think he's the guy you want at receiver, but don't trust Cam Ward yet. Not against Houston, so I would rather pass. And then Xavier Worthy plays like shit against Denver. He has very limited experience against them, but in 2 career games versus Denver, he has 1 bagel, and then the other game, only 1 reception for 11 yards. That is dog shit. So no thank you with Xavier Worthy this week. He's been bad this year as well. He has not lived up to expectation. What I envisioned for him has never worked out this season. So volume also moving down with Rashi back. I don't trust Xavier Worthy at all. I respect the Broncos defense, even without Pat Surtain. But these next 5 players are all running backs. I have Tyler Algier, JCM, Tyrone Tracy, Kyle Monungai, and Brian Robinson Jr., and I do not trust any of them. But if you told me they all scored a touchdown this week, would not be shocked, especially Algier, who had 2 touchdowns against the Colts last time. The Panthers aren't a bad matchup, but how long of a runway will he have? Eventually, it'll go back to Bijan Robinson. So not going to tell you to start him, but behind Pollard, it's not the worst option you could find. RB32 is somewhat valuable, but still, I don't expect more than 10 points from Algier. Same with JCM. I hate this offense. The running back committee is really annoying. And even if JCM leads the backfield again, he probably gets vultured by Chris Rodriguez 3 times in the last 4 games. That has happened. Meanwhile, JCM has no touchdowns in that span. So I don't know what to make of the Commanders' backfield. I think it's just too big of a rotation to bet on anyone, but the matchup is good. I would expect some decent yardage against the Dolphins from JCM. The Dolphins' run defense is not impressive. So good luck there. He's one of the last starting options I'm ranking, but I don't trust him, not with the touch split in Washington. And then last starter I am ranking is Tyrone Tracy versus Green Bay. The weather will help him, but the Packers are a terrible matchup. I don't trust him at all. And honestly, Devin Singletary's been more effective on a per touch basis. That has been the case last 2 games. So good luck there. Inside my top 100, I guess it's not the end of the world, but I don't trust my RB34 whatsoever. RB35 is Kyle Monangai, who only bailed you out with a touchdown last week. Now that Swift is healthy, I don't trust Monangai, but maybe off like elite volume, maybe they were giving him some rest last week in Chicago. He could still contribute heavily in that offense. But Brian Robinson Jr. kind of feels like he's in the same boat, and it's this Tyler Algier tier. You could get a nice touchdown, 11 points, but without it, you probably only get like 5, and that's just probably a best case scenario as well. Not worth it if it doesn't lead to a touchdown. So B-Rob looks like a good handcuff to roster, but behind Christian McCaffrey, as long as CMC's healthy, I don't endorse starting Brian Robinson Jr. But last receiver in this tier is Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver 44. He's a starter, but against Baltimore, not a good matchup, and the weather is a big problem. I don't expect much pass attempts out of Dylan Gabriel. I would bench Jerry Jeudy, but last 2 players in this tier have high upside because of the matchup. In this Bengals-Steelers game, both of these tight ends scored a touchdown in week 7. I have Freiermuth above Noah Fant, and I do upgrade them because of the matchup. But at 95-96 overall, I would only start them if I was in a pinch at tight end. I would not start them in a regular format. So that's kind of the bottom of the barrel. The rest of the way, you got to be super, super desperate, or your format has to be really deep, like 14 or 16 team league. And at this point, I'm not telling you to start any of them. But in DFS, here's where it gets interesting. These next 5 running backs all have some good matchups or good game script. We got Keaton Mitchell versus Cleveland. No Justice Hill, and Derrick Henry can't do it all himself. Good weather to run the ball. Keaton Mitchell will get like 8 or 10, maybe even 12 carries in this one. Devin Singletary isn't getting much volume, but is more effective on a per touch basis than Tyron Tracy. So good luck. Also, bad weather against Green Bay might be needed. Kenny Gainwell gets an elite matchup against Cincinnati, but only catches passes. And now Caleb Johnson is starting to come back. So that's a problem. Nick Chubb gets an elite matchup against Tennessee, could score a touchdown. They've given up a lot this season, but I only trust Woody Marks in this backfield. No thanks with Nick Chubb. And then Chuba Hubbard also gets a great matchup against the Falcons, but he's been really diminished lately, only like 5 touches per game last 2 games. I don't trust Chuba Hubbard. Only Rico Dowdle in this offense. But next 3 guys are receivers. High upside with Tez Johnson, had 2 touchdowns last week, but against Buffalo in the bad wind and heavy rain, no thanks. Outside my top 100, it's only just betting on Baker Mayfield why I would consider it, but I think I'll pass. And then Keon Coleman, literally the same argument with Josh Allen, but in general, he doesn't do anything. It's only because Dalton Kincaid is out why I have him ranked in the top 50, but I'll fade him only in DFS for some upside, but could be a shootout. It's possible both Tez and Keon have some value this week, but then Rashid Shaheed is still on a new team and didn't get enough volume last week to endorse. So I like the matchup against the Rams, some high upside and a potential shootout, but give me Cooper Kupp if I'm starting a second Seahawks receiver. The revenge narrative for Kupp, I think, is more valuable than Shaheed in a random spot. Hoping for a deep shot could happen, probably will not. Dalton Schultz is healthy enough to play, but missed 2 days in practice. I don't think he'll have a great game here. I'm worried about the matchup as well. Against Tennessee in his 4 career games with the Texans, he is only averaging 4 points per game. He gives you less than 30 yards on average against Tennessee. So capped upside, but the volume's been solid lately, so maybe the floor isn't that bad. And then I'm still a believer that Greg Dulcich has upside in an elite matchup against the Commanders. The Commanders are a top 7 matchup for tight ends, and Dulcich, I think, might get the benefit of Tua playing really well. I love Tua this week, so Dulcich, one of his pass catchers, got to be super fucking desperate. But at tight end 18 in DFS, he's kind of interesting. I would hit the higher on his projection on Underdog. But these next 5 receivers are really scraping the bottom of the barrel. It looks like Mac Hollins is more valuable than Demario Douglas, though. I did have Mac Hollins and Pop Douglas back-to-back in the top 50 on Thursday, but neither scored a touchdown, so not elite, but Hollins is stepping up with no booty. And then Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers back-to-back against the Chargers now that Brian Thomas Jr. is healthy. I don't trust either of them, but it's because of the matchup. There is some upside and a potential shootout, honestly, but the Chargers are good on defense, especially at stopping receivers, so no thanks. I still prefer Parker Washington, but if you look at Jacoby Myers in division against the Chargers when he was a Raider. He actually played really well. He was averaging over 11 points per game in his last 4 against the Chargers, an average of 70 plus yards in that sample size. So he could play well. He knows them well, and it's possible, but I don't really trust it. I have him back-to-back with Parker Washington, and I wouldn't start either of them at wide receiver 50 or 51. But Hollywood Brown, always some high upside, but no floor whatsoever. You got to be super, super risky to feel confident starting Hollywood Brown. And then last player in this tier, 112 overall, is my RB42. Jordan Mason is the last one I would consider before I am just expecting to lose. But none of these players are good unless you're just getting unique in DFS. We've got Jonnu Smith and Terrence Ferguson with good matchups at tight end, but only a touchdown can save you. Same with Jaden Higgins, Jalen Nailor, Greg Dortch, and Tyler Lockett. But these wide receiver 2s could play well. Higgins scored a touchdown. Nailor went over 100 yards last week. Greg Dortch scored a touchdown. And then Lockett gets Dallas. He does probably catch like 4 or 5 passes. But then I got Andrews in a bad matchup. I'm benching Andrews with some bad wind. I have no desire to start the Ravens tight end. Then AJ Barner, Luke Musgrave, I don't feel safe with them, so no thanks. Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson just floor plays for like 40 yards, and even that feels unrealistic. And then I have 8 running backs. I got Terrell Jennings, Chris Rodriguez, Jerome Ford, Bishal Tootin, Jalen Wright, Emmanuel Wilson, Blake Corum, and Brashard Smith, just hoping for that vulture touchdown. And then these last 4 players are my top 60 wideouts. We got Kamari DK behind Ridley. I think he does have the most value. And then Darnell Mooney could get a lot of volume if no Drake London this week, but I assume London will play. Mooney had 8 targets last week, only 1 reception. And then Andre Yoshivas could catch a deep shot with Flacco. It's possible there'll be at least 1 of those targets. And then last player ranked is Dante Thornton against the Cowboys. It's a good receiver matchup. And at some point, he will give you a house call. But I would feel really bold if I was putting Dante Thornton in my DFS lineup. I don't think I'm going to do that, more likely than not. But that's it for all of my flex rankings. Here on the screen, we have all of the top 100 at flex. You can pause it to make those lineup decisions. In general, I am starting the top 27. No doubt about it. Those are all like studs in my lineup. The players that are filling out my wide receiver 2 and running back 2 slots are in the top 44. And then my favorite flex plays are Ricky Pearsall at 45 down through Jake Ferguson at 61. Those are the best flex plays I think you can get. If they're in your lineup, you have a much higher floor and ceiling combo, and I would assume you're more likely to win with that combination. But even in the top 80, I still think those are solid flex plays. They're a little less exciting and definitely carry more risk, but I still see a good path for outcomes for them, especially guys like Malik Washington, some elite upside there. And then I do like Michael Wilson a lot this week. Even Amari DiMercado, Dave Montgomery, and the 2 Seahawks running backs I think are solid plays at running back in the flex spot. But I don't think they have that much upside, not a ton of value. You're just hoping for a touchdown. And then that's really the case once you exit the top 80. So I'm trying to bench everyone once we hit Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, even Keenan Allen and Jauan Jennings. I have low confidence in this week. But if you're desperate, you're desperate. You got to do what you got to do. So good luck if you're starting anyone outside the top 80, but outside the top 95, that's where, holy shit, that is getting really gross, and you are just asking for a prayer. Good luck. I assume you might go like Tez Johnson or Keon Coleman just for some upside, just to feel something. Odds are, though, it probably doesn't work out. But once we exit the top 112, beyond Jordan Mason, I don't think they're worth showing you a second time around. So those are my flex rankings, and I did promise you I would show you all of the individual rankings at running back and wide receiver. So here they are on the screen now. They are isolated and organized for those respective positions. So if you're just looking for a straight up lineup decision at one of these 2 spots, I'll leave this up for a few more seconds. You can pause it now if you still need it. I hope you got it. Let's move on. These are my quarterback, tight end, and defensive rankings, my final ranks on the week. And I'm only really trusting the top 10 at tight end. But quarterback is all the same. Didn't change anything at quarterback. And then defense also remains the same. So that is it for all of my updates at every position. And then the last thing I want to mention is the updated picks against the spread. I'm not changing any of my team selections. I am sticking with everyone I told you back on Monday. But the line for Seattle has gotten a little bit better. They are now +3. I previously had them at +2.5. So let's take +3. It opens the door for a push, and it definitely makes it a lot more valuable. That extra half point is massive. 3 is the biggest key number you can find against the spread in NFL. So that is good for me, but otherwise I'm sticking with the other 6 picks I made. And then in my straight up picks, I am actually going to make a pivot. I do not like the weather at all in Buffalo. And every time we see a bad weather game in Buffalo, the Bills look unfazed. I think if it's going to affect one team and not the other, it's the Buccaneers who get a downgrade. The Bills are probably going to be fine. So let's take Buffalo to win. Neither team won last week, but I do think the Bills will finish the season with a better record than Buffalo. So let's go with Buffalo. I originally took Tampa. This week, though, in the bad weather, I will take Buffalo. I think their run game is more effective. That'll be the tiebreaker between the two. So Buffalo is my pick now. And then I'm so tempted to take Carolina over Atlanta. If you tell me that Drake London doesn't play, then I will officially flip to Carolina, but that's the only way I'll do it. I'm going to stick with my original call on Monday and stick with the Falcons, but I do not feel good about it. I got to be honest. I think that one could burn me really bad. And y'all agree, but if you tell me London doesn't play, I will flip to Carolina. So a contingent change in opinion, but otherwise the only real change that I'm legitimately making is Buffalo to get the win. So that is it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'll see you next time, and thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.